Cheflock scones in The Final Course. Act 1. The Final Poisoning. Baker's Row had never felt so quiet. Cheflock scones sat in his kitchen table, unmoving, staring at an untouched plate before him. Dr. Dimson stood nearby, concern creasing his brow. "You're planning something," Dimson said, watching him closely. Cheflock didn't look up. Instead, he traced his fingers across the rim of his teacup. "I'm merely considering my options." Dimson folded his arms. "Don't insult me, Cheflock. I know you. When you start making peace with your surroundings, you're preparing for an exit." Before Cheflock could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Detective Lestrudel entered, holding a crisp white envelope. "It arrived an hour ago," Lestrudel said, handing it over. Cheflock unfolded the letter, expecting a simple message. Instead, 3 black and white photographs slipped from its folds, fluttering toward the table. He caught them before they landed, his eyes narrowing. Each image depicted an ordinary street scene, yet something about them felt deliberate. The second photo showed Mrs. Puddington exiting her bakery, while the third captured Lestrudel crossing a quiet road. The first, however, sent a chill through him. It was Dimsung, seated at a cafe, a shadowed figure in the reflection of the window behind him. Cheflock's grip tightened on the edges, a silent warning, a declaration. Michelinardi was watching them all. Without a word, he slid the photos back into the envelope, concealing them before either Lestrudel or Dimsung could notice. Only then did he pull out the letter, scanning the address before settling on the final 3 words. "This ends tonight." Act 2. The Secret Errand. Cheflock stepped onto the damp London streets, the envelope still in his pocket. Dimsung and Lestrudel followed closely behind, their expressions tense. "You're awfully quiet," Dimsung noted. "I have an errand to run," Cheflock said, his tone neutral. "I'll meet you at the address." Dimsung frowned. "An errand? Cheflock, now isn't the time." But Cheflock was already turning away, vanishing into the winding streets. 20 minutes later, he arrived at a modest, dimly lit laboratory tucked between a butcher shop and a tea house. He rapped his knuckles against the heavy metal door, and after a pause, a mechanical lock clicked open. Mozzie Pepper stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her lab coat slightly stained with what smelt like burnt sugar. "Cheflock," she said, surprised. "I thought you'd forgotten." "I never forget," he replied, stepping inside. The lab was cluttered with beakers, preserved herbs, and a series of vials glowing faintly under the low light. A large bubbling distillation rig hissed softly in the corner. Mozzie moved quickly, retrieving a small vial from a locked case. "This is experimental," she said, holding it up. "I still don't know if it will work." Cheflock examined the liquid inside, watching as it shifted colors under the lamplight. He said nothing. Mozzie hesitated, lowering her voice. "You know you don't have to do this alone." Cheflock finally met her gaze. His expression was unreadable. "I'll let you know if I survive." Before she could respond, he slipped the vial into his coat and turned for the door. Meanwhile, Dimsung and Lestrudel arrived at the address first. The building was eerily quiet. They exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The moment the doors shut behind them, a click echoed through the room. The trap had been sprung. Act 3. The Final Banquet. The address led to a private dining hall, tucked away in the wealthiest district of London. Michelinardi's most elite patrons filled the candlelit room, murmuring over their elaborate meals. Cheflock stepped inside, his coat trailing behind him. At the head of the table, a masked figure arose to greet him. "For all your meddling, Mr. Scones, we have prepared a fitting farewell." Servants entered a carrying dish under a silver cloche. The moment the lid was lifted, Cheflock knew. This was the final poison. He turned to the masked figure. "And if I refuse?" The response was immediate. "Then your friends suffer." Cheflock glanced at the far end of the room, where a set of velvet curtains was drawn. The faintest movement behind them suggested unseen captives. Dim Sum? Miss Puddington? Lestrudel? He couldn't be sure. A choice was never truly given. Cheflock excelled and picked up his fork. He took a bite. Act 4. The Illusion of Defeat. The moment the food touched his tongue, Cheflock felt his senses collapse inward. The last remnants of taste flickered and died, leaving only silence where flavor once lived. A ringing filled his ears. His limbs grew heavy. He fell forward, catching himself on the table's edge. The room erupted in applause. The masked figure leaned down. Even the great Cheflock Scones could not escape his fate. As his vision blurred, a single thought cut through the haze. Mozzie's vial, the gamble he had taken. Would it be enough? Then, darkness swallowed him. When he awoke, he was somewhere new. A dimly lit chamber. The scent of aged paper and leather-bound books surrounded him. Dim Sum stood over him, his face a mask of quiet devastation. "It's all over," he whispered. They took everything." Cheflock blinked, adjusting to the weight in his limbs. His throat was dry. He could still breathe, still move, but his taste? He tried to recall a sensation of the dish he had eaten, but it was gone, utterly and completely. Dim Sum hesitated before speaking. His voice was hollow. "You've lost everything, Cheflock." Cheflock closed his eyes for a long moment, then exhaled. "Then it's done." Act 5. The Hidden Plan. Days passed, then weeks. London adjusted to the loss of Cheflock Scones, the world-renowned culinary detective. Articles were written about his tragic downfall. Michelin already tightened his grip on the food industry. The game had changed. But Cheflock had not disappeared. From the shadows, he worked, unraveling Michelin-Arty's network, dismantling his empire piece by piece. He could no longer act in light, but that no longer mattered. Taste was gone, but the mind remained. Then, one night, he returned to Baker's Row. Dim Sum found him standing in the dark kitchen, hands resting lightly on the countertop. A farewell was coming. "You shouldn't be here," Dim Sum said quietly. "I had to see it one last time." Dim Sum swallowed hard. "When will I see you again?" Cheflock's eyes softened. "Don't look for me." And then, just like that, he was gone. Act 6. A World Without Cheflock. Months passed. The world continued. Dim Sum did his best to move on. Mrs. Puddington continued managing Baker's Row. Lestrudel chased his own cases, still looking for the answers Cheflock would have found in minutes. But something was happening. Michelin-Arty's network was unraveling. The organization was losing its grip. Factories closed without explanation. Black market suppliers vanished. Investigations turned up nothing but echoes. And then, one day, a small package arrived at Baker's Row. No return address, no markings. Dim Sum opened it. Inside was a single silver spoon engraved with a barely visible letter, S. A slow smile crossed Dim Sum's face. "You never could sit still, could you?"